was marketing a love at first sight for you, or it actually grew on you slowly over a period of time? How did that happen?
Broadly, I think when I was a young kid, teenager, etc., some of the advertising that we now call iconic were actually being beamed live on television at that point in time. Yeah. So, and that was also a time when there was a lot of media attention on advertising, marketing, etc. was coming up. So, all the legendary marketeers and advertising folks whom we look up to right now, they were actually cutting their teeth literally at that point in time. So all the Piyush Pandey, R. Balkis of the world, they were probably entering. So it was a great time for advertising, and that was, I think, the first interesting piece. I remember that I grew up in Calcutta, and there was this one hoarding in all of Calcutta, at least the one that I knew of, which had an Amul creative. And those creatives were changed over a week or a fortnight or whatever. And I remember taking a particular route of a bus so that the bus would go past that hoarding site, just for me to see that what is the new Amul creative that's come up. So I think it started with advertising.
So you did your engineering and then you went on to do MBA from XLRI. Do you think, like a lot of engineering students here on the platform today, do you think an engineer has a kind of a definite edge when they become marketeers and do their MBA and become marketers? Because a lot of engineers go on to do their MBAs and become marketers. So how has your engineering helped you?
Look, I mean, this is a debate that should an engineer continue to remain an engineer, or should he or she waste a seat? That's a very common debate you keep hearing, that, hey, you did engineering, now you're selling soap. What really helps, I mean, and I'm being candid here, what really helps engineers is in the entrance of the of MBA exam. I mean, MBA institutes. So there is, whether it's a good thing or a bad, CAT or any of all the major MBA entrance tests. I do not know the exact structure now, but at least for us, there was a distinct leaning towards numbers, analytical ability, logical reasoning, etc. Therefore, if you were an engineer, it was kind of it was easy for you to get in. But whether you will do well or not, I don't think engineering predicts that or helps you in any way. I think having an inherent interest in whatever you study, I mean, sorry for sounding a little preachy, but I think you need to be...
So what has changed from, in terms of marketing in last 1 decade or so? And I also want you to talk to me about what is that unchanging core of marketing which has stayed relevant even today and will stay relevant even in future.
Consumer being at the center of it cannot change. I mean, then the purpose of marketing ceases, so to speak. People talk about, let's say, digital media as one of the change events. But I think that digital media is like, let's say, TV came in the 1980s in a big way. So what really changed? It was, I mean, then it's actually for the marketeer to figure out, I have one more additional media to plan for or budget for and execute for. But I think what has fundamentally changed over the last decade or so, is that the consumer has become a lot more vocal, or has received a lot more power to become vocal, to have an one-on-one conversation with the brands. And that I think is a great thing. It is sometimes seen as a negative, but I think it's a great thing that actually consumers are able to talk and express very freely.
In fact, I see this recent example of Unilever dropping word fair from Fair and Lovely as more than anything the victory of the voice of consumer in India, right? So there is no way for the brands today to be absolutely ignoring the voice of the consumer. The voice has become extremely powerful.
Absolutely. I think that's a very interesting thing, because the Fair and Lovely consumer was never heard
Yeah.
till a certain point in time. Fair and Lovely was a fantastic brand, very strong brand, huge number of sales. So it was assumed that if there are millions of people in this country who are willing to buy a fairness cream, then fairness cream as a concept, or a fairness as a concept, is something which is aspirational, and therefore we should cater to it. I mean, that's the straight linear kind of logic. I think there are influencers who were saying that fairness as a physical ideal should not be taken. That, I think, two things happened. One, a lot more consumers started hearing that voice, that, why is fairness an ideal look? And the evolution of those consumers' thought process has changed. That's number one. And that this thought process changed was communicated very strongly to, let's say, an Unilever across the country, and maybe even across the world.
How do you achieve that fine balance of how building a kind of a learning education brand without coming across as selling it too hard?
Which is why I say that the believability for an education brand does not have to be high. It has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. You cannot say anything which can even be misconstrued. My personal belief is that the best way to make someone believe you is to get others to talk about it. So therefore, the probably the best advertising that works in the education category is testimonial advertising.
For big universities with physical campuses like, say, a Manipal or any of these universities, how will this wave of online learning impact them? Will it impact them at all?
Oh yes, it will impact. It is impacting and will impact. What this pandemic has essentially done is it has just accelerated certain things that we thought were in the future.
Yeah.
You see, what we did is that we were in a 100% classroom scenario, and over a week's time we moved to a 100% online scenario. Now, the way I see it, that 100% of either is not the ideal scenario. We are just stuck with this right now, and we'll evolve and come out of this hopefully over a period of time, or whatever.
Just building on that, anecdote, and the question is that for students today, be it your engineering, commerce, or whatever you're doing right now, what should be the real purpose of education? That 3 or 4 years of their lifetime that they spend in college, what should they strive for to take away from that will help them?
So it is important for people to find out, young people, to find out what they really enjoy. And then it's like that famous thing, that find whatever you love and let it kill you kind of a thing. Because I remember, my personal experience was, I think that the first time I enjoyed studying was when I was in B school. When I started reading some of the marketing books, I felt that I was reading let's say a novel or something, because they were so interesting. And I said that, what's wrong with me? I had a very healthy distaste for academics all my life. This was the first time I said that, hey, this has never happened to me.
What are some of the lessons that brands can learn from Bollywood, from the Indian film industry?
I think from an advertising point of view, what advertising can learn from Bollywood is memorability. We remember dialogues of Sholay, which is a 45-year-old film.
Yes.
So therefore, it is that memorability. Bollywood does this crystallization into a pithy line, a memorable, a song line, or a dialogue, or a mannerism. That the way certain symbols or certain things that heroes, heroines have done. It kind of they do that very well. So they are great at shorthand creativity. That's something that brands should absolutely embrace. Bollywood is always on brand. If I tell you that I am going to see a Yash Chopra film, I don't need to say anything else. You know what I am talking about. Bollywood does that great. The moment, let's say, Johnny Lever walks in, you start laughing. He does not have to say anything. You are like geared up to laugh. Right? So Bollywood does that on-brand thing very well. Being on brand, that if you have to say a brand message, that Manoj Kumar is patriotic, Dilip Kumar is tragic, Jitendra is jumping jack. you have no confusion. So it's like, I think these two things are, completely, that memorability and that being consistent. What is branding if it is not consistent?
But essentially, how you tell your story is, I think, extremely critical. So how does one really sharpen that storytelling skills?
I think you need to be absolutely crystal clear about two things. That what do you want to say about yourself, about your brand, anything? What do you want to say? And to whom is it meant for?
Yeah.
And both these questions have to have a sharp answer. It is not, you cannot say that, it is meant for everybody. If it is looking like that, then you should ask yourself the reverse question, that saying, who is it not meant for?
I love this book that you've written about, Salim Javed. Some of the greatest Indian movies have been written by them. And of course, the book has done extremely well. What I wanted to know is, writing that book, were you able to if I were to ask you, what is the secret of a good partnership and a creative partnership? But I'm also asking this because I work with so many startups, and a lot of startups I've seen people where you have two founders, co-founders. Generally, they seem to click more than single founders, right? So what do you think makes for a great creative partnership?
I'll tell you a story about Salim Khan and Javed Akhtar. In one of the interviews, somebody asked Javed Saab that, what did you write and what did Salim Saab write? Can you tell me, in this script, what you wrote? So he sort of jokingly said that, I wrote the vowels, he wrote the consonants. Which meant that that several years after their partnership got over, he never divulged that what he did or what he could have taken credit. He could have said that, I wrote that line or that scene was written by me. He did not do that.
Yeah.
So there is another interesting story which many directors, producers said that Salim Javed never disagreed publicly. When they came to present a script, they were like, both of them used to write, talk about it as if it is their own thing. So they never wanted to change anything.
Yeah.
Which meant that there was a phenomenal amount of understanding and to some extent trust. I think it is true for any partnership.
How do you really balance these multiple passion points with your kind of schedule? And the other thing is, what is the importance of having passion in life, different passions in life?
I very firmly believe that just because somebody is writing a book or somebody is playing in a band or something, I don't think that passion is any more respectable than somebody who just wants to watch Netflix. So everybody should have a passion because, not with the end result of writing something or creating an output, but the input itself, if it is enjoyable enough. As to how one balances, I think people find time for what they really like. Right? So I, for example, always wonder that why do people run? To me, running is a tiring activity. I say that, when you know that you have such a busy day at work, why will somebody go out for a run in the morning? You shouldn't that person sleep for 1 more hour or something. The person who likes running, you are yourself a runner. For you, it's not a task. It's something that you enjoy, right?
True.
So it's exactly like that. That actually, when I have a bad day at work, or I'm having a tiring day at work, or I'm feeling a little down, what I look forward to is writing. I write every night for at least half an hour or something like that. I'm actually looking forward to it. So I say that, can I just get this? I wish this day ends and, I can go. And so it's not a duty or a chore for me. It's actually something I look. So similarly for Twitter, I think what I enjoy about Twitter is that there are so many like-minded people whom I have found. Who are tweeting on movies or trivia about movies. About 50% of the masala from my last few books would have originated from Twitter. Somebody has tweeted something, though I started researching something, then I found something which was very strange, I did not know, and so on and so forth. So that's, again, it's become like a sort of a jamming kind of a thing.
So awesome, and I think that the true mark of passion is that when you're doing it, you don't feel like you're doing a chore. You are so immersed in it,
that's very important.
And even small moments of that feeling are so beautiful. especially when I go out for runs in the morning, that sense of achievement and starting your day on a high, and it's I can completely understand. The other thing I think, which is important of what you said, is that how to use social media, right? Either you use it to create inspiration, like in your case, and use it to your advantage. A large majority of young people today use it or don't use it. They get consumed by it, right? They're spending so much time on it, and they're writing all kinds of things on it without realizing that what you're doing on social media almost becomes like your CV in real life. So you got to be very careful of what you're writing, what are the things that you're liking, right? And so I think that's a bit of a careful judgment or a kind of filter that one needs to use for oneself.